Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. My name is Namrata, and I work for an organization called Shift Eco, a curated platform for eco-friendly products. As part of our work with selling eco-friendly products, we also want to raise awareness and dialogue about the key issues about living sustainably, and building future generations that are eco-friendly is very, very critical. And that's the reason why we are having this webinar today. Nurturing future generations requires many different stakeholders to come together, whether that's parents, whether that's institutions, whether that's education. And we've been really fortunate to get three lovely speakers from these different stakeholders. And I want to request the speakers to introduce themselves quickly. Over to you, Catherine.
Hello everyone, my name's Catherine. I work with the British Mums team. We're a community of mothers who live in Dubai, or we've got other groups that operate in Abu Dhabi and across the GCC and in the UK. And we're a community of British mothers or mothers raising British children. And we share information every day, whether it's tips, advice, or where to get things from in the countries we're living in, or advice and general advice if we're moving to those countries as well. Me personally, I've been living in Dubai for 6 years now, and I'm originally from just outside London, and I have a very active and curious 2-year-old.
Great. Thanks so much, Catherine. Over to you, Brett.
Good afternoon, Namrata, and to everybody that's listening. My name is Mr. Brett Girven. I'm the principal at the Arbor School. You can see behind me, we describe ourselves as an ecological school based in the British curriculum here in Dubai. I am a Kiwi, a New Zealander by birth. You can probably hear that in my accent still, despite having been here in the Middle East for almost 12 years. So educator by training, zoology and environmental scientist is my background. Bit of a greenie, obviously, reasonably passionate greenie, and passionate educator here with the kids. Thank you for having me on.
Great. Thanks so much, Brett. Over to you, Colette.
Hi, Namrata. Hi, everyone. My name is Colette Barr, and I am the author of the Eco Heroes book series for children. I self-published that with my illustrator partner a few years ago. So we started a company here in the UAE to be sustainable and raise awareness of some climate change topics that are relevant to children here. I have been living in the UAE for almost 10 years. I've got a corporate background actually in consultancy and oil and gas. So I've come from the other side, and at heart I am a greenie. So I decided to kind of marry the two up and live my passion, which is to bring awareness to some climate change issues. So thanks very much for having me on, and lovely to be here with these other speakers.
Thank you so much for being here, Colette. So thank you so much to all three of you. I personally am really excited to have the three of you on board. It'll be so interesting to get such different perspectives from the various stakeholders that actually nurture our future generations. So that's really interesting. Before we get into the details of the webinar, I first want to put out a poll for all the attendees to start understanding your point of view of what the current levels of awareness are amongst children today. I'll give you 30 seconds to complete this poll. I'm giving 5 grace seconds for anyone who's still thinking about the answers. Okay. So 50% of the people that voted say that the current generation is quite aware of the key environment issues that are being faced today. However, while 50% people are saying that people are aware, 57% people say that children are slightly aware of how their individual behaviors positively or negatively contribute to these issues. And I think that's the whole point, right? Awareness has to lead into action. And that's why it's very important for all of us different stakeholders to work together to lead to that action. That's very, very important. So over to the panelists, are you all shocked by these results, or is this something that you resonate with?
I'll begin. It's there's a huge gap, isn't there, between knowing and doing.
Yeah.
You know, the knowing doing gap, and I think that's the reality here. Is that particularly, you know, as they get older and they start to understand that the content, you know, most of our children, and I guess if we're talking about the British curriculum, understanding cycles and things like global warming and carbon cycles is a part of the curriculum, but understanding what it is and then actually taking that information and doing something, there's a huge gap. And I guess that's where it changes from education to activism or action.
Right. Definitely.
I agree. I think I'm not too shocked by the results. I think there's a lot more awareness. I think we have to applaud that. It's getting better, but there's still so much we can continue to do. And it's really interesting because I talk about this cycle and this education with compared to my parents' education, my education and what my daughter's now getting. And you can see it's really developed, and there's definitely people leading the way in this, but so much more can be done and others could follow with this education and making children aware.
Right. But a lot of the reasons for the development in the education is because over time we've started destructing the environment a lot more, so that awareness and the back to roots sort of thing is more important. But yeah, there is absolutely an evolution in the kind of education. What do you think, Colette?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was at school a very long time ago, and I was learning about climate change back then and how terrible it was that, you know, the volcanoes and the ice caps were well, the volcanoes were going to go off, the ice caps were melting, this was all going to happen. I knew that like 30 plus years ago. So it seems that we've not really come an awful long way since then. And whilst the requirements to keep all of the requirements maybe to have more climate change awareness in schools have definitely come into play, that gap between action and learning is still massively there. So it's now this rush to do something before time runs out. And that's the bit that we're trying to the gap that we're trying to bridge, really.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. So while we're trying to bridge the gap between awareness and action, why do you all think it's important to build eco-conscious generations?
So I'll start with that.
Yeah.
My mic's on. So I think it's really important because, as Catherine mentioned, you know, the eco-consciousness of generations has changed over time. And yes, it's got more, we're better now than we were, you know, when I was growing up, when my grandparents were growing up, but then we are doing more to the harm to the environment now as well. And there's this rush, obviously, to try to do something before it's irreversible. Mm-hmm. And also, you know, I feel that people are quite late in the day to change their habits. It's more difficult for adults to change their habits, where it's actually much easier for children to have it absorbed into the way of their lives. You know, growing up, there's so many things that I wish I'd known that now trying to go back and unlearn them or unteach them to my own kids. You know, I realise that there's a cycle that you've got to break if you want them to do something differently. I mean, I don't want my kids growing up thinking that salad comes out of packets. You know, that's not the way it should be. And there's a lot of people who still live like that. So whilst there's a lot of awareness in some parts, maybe Irish curriculum is a very good example. There are other curriculums where it doesn't feature as strongly.
Right. I think the habitual change part is a very important thing that you bring up, and completely agree with you on that one.
Yeah, I agree with what Colette says, just to echo that as well, that, you know, it's raising an eco-conscious generation is really important, because they need to learn to look after their planet, so they still have a beautiful planet and have what we grew up with, but also as an approach to everything. I want my daughter to learn how to look after things, how to value things, and whether that's the planet and relationships and people and items, like I want her to learn the value of that. And that, I think, invest in that, and her looking at the world as a community, not just as her individual self. And I think teaching her to be eco-conscious, look after the planet that she's lucky to have for the next generation, for her children, if she decides to have any, then that's kind of the values I want her to install in her as a whole person as well. And I think it goes really hand in hand with that.
And for my side, I think it's really important to remain positive, because these big global challenges largely are human caused and human solvable. I mean, I grew up, as Colette said a long time ago, learning about environmental change, but in New Zealand it was about the ozone layer, because we would get crispy fried if we went outside, and you could spend 10 minutes in the sun in New Zealand and you'd be sunburned as anything. But through human solutions and human actions, largely that problem has now been reduced largely, and we've moved on to the next challenge. So these are solvable human challenges, but if we don't actually focus on finding a solution to these things, then we won't find a solution. So I think it's really positive in one way, but it is critical that we don't all have to be environmental warriors, green, eco warriors. We just have to shift the norm from where it is to where it needs to be, so that it becomes a norm in how we practice in our daily activities. And once we can do that, then the weight of action will shift, and we will have solutions that will change the way it is.
So I think we all agree that building eco-conscious generations is really important, because the habits will change because of the damage that's being done. And I know we've asked that what the current awareness level of children is, but I'll leave it to the three different stakeholders. Do you think educators, parents, governments, institutions are doing enough to nurture eco-conscious generations?
I'll go first, as I was last. You've I guess lumped a lot together in one. If I said government, no, I mean large scale, rapid, urgent change will not happen unless it's at federal and government level. We can make lots of individual actions, and we can all change the way we need to act, but really large scale change needs to happen at that level, and at the moment it's just not happening fast enough. People are becoming more aware. When this group here is one example of fantastically aware people, but I would say governments are not changing fast enough now.
Yeah, and actually I'd say there's even been kind of a backward step over the past year due to COVID. A lot of governments have implemented single-use plastic in use for certain items that have been delivered due to COVID and sanitisation, which obviously is really important. But then the use of that is there's now more plastic and single-use plastic, because people are being care more about sanitisation, which is really important, but it's learning the balance of them living together as well. I was reading an article, actually the British mums, some of the team, we were discussing this morning about in Sri Lanka, how they've actually said that everything's got to be delivered in plastic for protection. So now there's all this more single-use plastic in the water and in the ocean and in landfill over the past year.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that governments definitely need to do more and more quickly as well. Parents, I think a lot of parents are doing as much as they, well, not as much as they can, but they can do more. I also think that as consumers, we want to change our demand profile as well. So, institutions, companies, food and beverage producers, those that are packaging everything, hoteliers, it's up to industry and commerce to change, and they're only going to change at the pace that we need them to if there is governmental laws and fines that are going to push them into changing quickly enough. Because as consumers, we are faced with choices every single day, and if you have kids, absolutely, they are constantly bombarded with all the choices in the supermarkets, the toy store. It's like going in, it's a minefield going into a mall and seeing what your kids are going to come back with if you give them some money. And it's frightening, because they're going to choose the wrong things. And I think that if there's less choice out there, or more choices that are eco-friendly, then we're in a much better position as consumers to be able to make the right choices. At the moment, we're just flooded with plastic that we don't want, or flooded with single-use items. And there's no getting away from that. Every single place is pushing back. I'm in a hotel the other day, and they give me a plastic pen in a plastic wrapper to sign the bill. And it's very, I had the conversation with them. They don't understand it because it's COVID, but when you stand back from that and say, look, we need to do more at a higher level to stop this completely. And it's not that COVID is the biggest security threat or the biggest risk for us all. It's climate change and what's happening out there and the rising temperatures. And that is the message that needs to get across, not that it's going to stop COVID by covering a plastic pen and more plastic. Mm. So I think from a consumer level, we need to demand more as well.
Right. And I think that shift is happening as well, Colette. But like you said, habitual change, especially when you've grown up, takes a lot longer. And that's why it's our advantage to, sort of nurture future generations to already imbibe these habits so that they are more conscious consumers than, our generations are. So I agree with you on that one. Let's now deep dive with all our three speakers. Let's start with you, Catherine. You're working with British Mums. Tell us a little bit more about your work with British Mums and how British Mums enables your, mothers to be more eco-friendly and imbibe eco-friendly habits amongst their children.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been working with British Mums now for a long time, and we are a community. In the Dubai community alone, there's over 14,000 of us. And what's been really interesting to see is that sustainability is becoming more and more important as a consumer and with the group. We can see it every month. We can see people requesting where to find items, or if they know F&B producers that do less packaging, or do they know somewhere to, rather than just throw their items away, whether it's children's toys, is there anywhere to donate? This comes up a lot on the group. Where can I take this stuff to be donated? Is there anyone that can use this stuff? So people are becoming more aware and want to live that lifestyle. It's just finding where it is. So we actually started a sustainability event, which we now do annually. And it was really interesting because the first year we did it, we weren't sure if there was going to be great pickup, but there was, and it was one of our most successful meetups with the theme around sustainability. And we had a government member come down and talk about sustainability and what they're doing in the UAE. And it was really good to see how important this was. And now we're doing this event annually. And what's great is it's enabling us as a team to go out and find brands that are not just talking the talk, but walking the walk when it comes to sustainability with their CSR policies, and bringing these brands to our community. We've got a sustainability event coming up, and we found this company that produces sand that is actually great for sustainability because it's almost like magic sand, the way it can hold water. So if you install this sand, you're using less DWA, you're using less water because it can retain more to grow fruit and vegetables if you want to do so, and then less energy to produce this water. So all these little things that we can now find and bring to our community. And it's great to see that the community is interested, they want to do it. And I think what I've noticed more about our community and being a parent in general, we are all so busy, and don't underestimate the little changes you can make, and they all add up. For example, me personally, I know that with a sustainable lifestyle, the thing we get educated most on is our diet. Having more of a plant-based diet can really impact the global way the land is used for farming. I'm not full vegan, but I do try and implement daily meals that have no meat or are vegan friendly. And I also we have something called Vegetarian Tuesday in my house. We have one day a week where we don't eat meat. We have a lot of meat eaters in my family. I don't think it's quite possible to shift their focus to be totally meat free, but we've been doing this for about 3 years. And since then, it's now people are finding new recipes, new food, and trying to do that. And there's 7 billion people on the planet. If everyone did this once a week, the impact would be huge. And that's just a small shift in your lifestyle. And that's what we see with our community, these little changes that all add up.
Right. So we at Shift Eco say the same thing, Catherine. We call it small shifts, big impact. So we're totally aligned on that. So you deal with an entire cohort of 14,000 plus parents, and parents play a really pivotal role in nurturing children, their ideologies. What do you think practically parents can do to imbibe these habits on a day-to-day basis for children?
There's lots of little things. I mean, leading by example, it was really interesting. We went through the stage with my daughter where, when she'd finished something and she started to be able to communicate, we used to say, put it in the bin. And then we saw her, whenever she'd finished with something, she'd think the thing was to do is to then get rid of it and throw it away. So now we've actually started to shift our focus. So we have a box where when she's finished with something, so like she's helped unpack the eggs, so like, what can we do with this? And she now puts it in her arts and crafts box, or she separates the recycling. And just get them involved in those, it seems mundane activities in the house, but get them involved so they realize the process of products and what happens. And if you take them shopping, like talk to them about kind of like why you're deciding to maybe purchase this item, or talk to them, you know, you're going to a supermarket, but I always say to my little one where the food comes from, and I relate it back to stories she might know from books or TV, just to help her realize that that's all connected. And like Colette said, salad doesn't come from a bag, it comes from something that grows, that you nurture. Something that we're about to start in our house that we haven't done yet is learning how to grow our own fruit and vegetables. I grew up and my parents always had allotments and they used to bring home loads of things, and my daughter hasn't experienced that yet. And I think that's a really simple idea, you know, even if you just want to get a pot and grow herbs at home, teaching children where things come from and how long it takes to produce something, and the love and labor that goes into it just makes them value it more. So yeah, so definitely getting them involved with the decisions, and small things, if you have the space to do some sort of growing your own fruit and vegetables, I think is a good practical idea.
Right. I think you're really right. There are a lot of activities you can do, but as parents, I'm not a parent myself, but parents seem really busy, right? And sometimes being mindful and being, you know, eco-friendly, it takes a lot of thought and takes time. So how do you overcome that barrier?
It's difficult. Like, the reality is we're parents, we're busy, convenience gets in the way sometimes, if I'm completely honest. So it's preparing for the week ahead when I can with regards to food and trying to avoid wastage, educating myself on the brands that are providing a quick service that I might need as a parent, but there's lots of great food delivery companies there that actually will have a box tick, do you want us to remove packaging? Make sure if you're doing that sort of thing, you're actively unticking that box, take the time to read. Or if you see that write back to them if you're getting, you know, if you're ordering a service and you see excessive packaging, you know, if people hear enough, and as Colette said, as consumers, we start to demand more, it will take effect. And people are doing that. And I'm really lucky in the UK, there's a lot of good policies that are in place, and that we've really changed our behaviour with regards to shopping. I remember when they were going to bring the ban on single-use plastic bags in supermarkets and you have to pay, but everyone's just got used to it now. Everyone in the UK brings their bag, or they have to pay to a bag. So, and I think it's just getting used to that idea here as well. You know, keep your reusable shopping bags in the car, have a few of them, keep them everywhere, so you don't have to rely on that.
Right. So a lot of planning is involved, which
planning,
Great. Any other activities that you can share with parents on what they can do?
Again, I think the best thing for eco generation is just get kids out in nature as well. That's always a good thing. I often hear whispers, oh, there's not much nature in Dubai, but there is. It's just different. It's not our forest, but we've got deserts. So it's not, you know, I love that my daughter goes back to her friends in the UK and she talks about how she sees camels are normal, and just learns about a different kind of biodiversity than we have in the UK. And she gets exposure to both. And it's appreciating that. And we've got access to so many free parks and things in Dubai. Like there's Love Lakes, there's Expo 2020 Lake Al Qudra. Like, just take your kids out, go for a walk. It's a free activity, and get them close to nature and learn about it. Spend time outside.
Fair enough, if the weather permits. And I think the best of the weather is getting past us. But, no, thanks so much, Catherine. That was really informative. Over to you, Brett. You are working for the Arbor School, which is an ecological school. What does that mean?
We're an ecological school based in the British curriculum. So I guess if you separated the what, so the what would be based in the British curriculum sort of outcomes and objectives. But what's really important to us is that it's more than just being a green school. So you might see behind me, yes, okay, it is green. Yes, we care about recycling and you reduce all those other things. But ecology is actually an understanding of not just animals and plants. It's actually the interconnections between animals and plants and humans and the living and the non-living environment. And when we understand those connections, the eventual understanding is that there is no separation. So if we can understand an ecological worldview, i.e. humans are a part of systems, they're not separate, then that eventual understanding for children and for adults will mean that we will come to the realization that whatever I do here in this environment will impact on me. We're not separate from it. And so understanding that level of interconnection, understanding that things work in systems, understanding how the parts go together, eventually will help us to solve future challenges. And so I guess ecological style of thinking, or what we say eco-literate, is understanding the models of how an environment, how ecology works, and then taking that understanding to build sustainable human communities in the future.
Right.
So it's still, you know, reading, writing, science, those are all still fundamental elements of what we do. It's about how we present that, the way in which we experience that, the projects, the authenticity of the learning, and then the environments in which we put it.
Right. So in practical learning, what does that mean?
So for our youngest ones, it's experiential, right? So if you're going to do Jack and the Beanstalk, well, then why not go to a beanstalk and feel the leaves and look at the tendrils and smell them and feel that texture, because you're loading up with all sorts of ammunition, and that experience is really, really important. As they get slightly older, well, they might go and visit the pond. Yes, it's a pond, but actually sun feeds the algae feed the fish feed the turtle. There's a cycle there, there's a system. And then so we can build layers of complexity into that. And we say, well, if that system has a carrying capacity, what about this human system? Or what about this fish farming system? How do those model and mimic what happens in that smaller system? And so we build that layer upon layer of complexity as they get older and older. And then, you know, you take a terribly good example of systems thinking is COVID. We can't solve the medical problem until we solve the transport. We can't solve transport until we solve finance. We can't solve finance until we solve the next part of it. And all of those have to be taken within a lens of, there's no utopian sort of quick fix. It's actually looking at all the different fixes we have to make at the same time, and which is the best trade-off so that we can come to a solution that works. So again, it's experiential for the littlest ones. It's just building in, being in nature, understanding what nature is, using nature as a teacher. A little bit older, they tend to start to question and build their questions around nature and in nature. And then as they get older, they take those models and they might apply it to a finance system, or to a farming system, or to a problem that they're looking to solve.
Right. So this experiential learning is in addition to the regular topics that they learn in school.
Not in addition, no. I think that's critically important. One of the questions here is it extra? No, at my school particularly, it's built in. Or that our vision is that it is not bolt on, it's built in. Some schools have a different focus, and they might do a sustainability unit. They might have a garden that they visit every now and again. For me, it's critically important that my children learn to be eco-literate. So they will understand nature's systems. They will take part in nature. They will understand by going to the organic greenhouse that if they plant it, they have to water it, they have to harvest it, it has to go into the food system. It's not just drop in one day and say, oh yay, the plants have grown. There is a system here, there is a connection, and it has to be built into everything we do as much as we can, while still trying to make sure that at the end, you know, we have numerate, literate, great communicators that understand the best of what's been said and done and thought in our world.
Right. So what role, not just the Arbor School, but education in general, what role does education play in making children aware of the environmental issues we face today?
You know, strangely, children change really quickly. They become eco-warriors. I said before, I'm not trying to create eco-warriors, but they become eco-warriors overnight. And within a couple of weeks, our children will be going home, telling mum and dad off, you know, using plastic bags and drinking out of plastic bottles. They change really, really quickly. So those, I say surface, but they're important. They're visible, they're tangible things of what we can do. So things like plastics, they quickly change their attitude. What we really want to do is shift the norms, because it's not just plastic. That's just one example, right? We've got ocean acidification, we've got decrease in biodiversity, we've got habitat change and destruction, we've got global warming. So these are bigger pictures that we need to understand. So becoming eco-literate, understanding the ecological background of these concepts, by understanding the science, by connecting it to the maths, by understanding how to write in different genres, all those sorts of things coming together mean that we will have students that understand and can apply the understanding of ecosystems to human models. For example, a finance system right now, it assumes infinite supply of materials, which is, it's just a fallacy. It's false. We all know it to be untrue, and yet somehow our economics models are built on the fact that we just have an endless level of growth. That's quantitative growth, not qualitative growth. It's not about getting better, it's just getting more. And we all know, we all understand entirely that it's impossible. It cannot work. So if we have that truth, there's just a gap between knowing and doing.
Right, right. Um, So they look like children who are aware of the issue. They're trying to go back to their parents and get parents to do better. But we already have a climate crisis. We're already facing a climate crisis, right? And sometimes telling children about these gruesome details about what that entails can be daunting for children. So, how do you all communicate that to children to make them aware of how things stand today so that they understand the urgency of the situation?
Um, sorry, there's a whole lot of children running in the background. I forgot to mention, I guess, because what I said is kind of dire and scientific, but they have a blast, by the way. You know, being out in nature means digging in the mud. It means going to the garden. It means playing with the animal. Well, not playing, but understanding the animals and how to show respect. So you know, I'm not going to present to my smallest children that the world's on fire. You know, we're all going to burn if we don't solve the problem. What you're presenting them with is experiences to understand why this is a good thing. Looking after nature and being a part of nature is fantastic. What an easy sell. What child doesn't want to go out and make mud pies? So we've somehow lost that as a part of our education system. So our vision is to bring nature back to the children in a form that we can. Obviously, as they get older, then you start to inculcate those ideas. As I say, here's a model of what works. How can we apply that? Right, here's a problem we have. How can we apply our learnings to that problem to see if we can figure out a solution that solves for the pattern, not just solves one of the symptoms? And I mean, even, again, not to deride the problem of plastics. Plastic is a symptom of bigger problems, right? It's access to fresh water. It's municipal services to make sure that people that on the lower end of the salary scale have access to all sorts of services. So it's actually just a symptom of bigger problems.
Right. So the ecological school and the Arbor School sounds great, but
Thank
the
you.
reality of the matter is there are not so many ecological schools in UAE. So if we look at the education sector more broadly, do you think the education sector is doing enough to make children more eco-conscious? Yeah.
Yes, and I guess yes and no. Again, I think educators are desperate to get this into their curriculum, but it is a busy curriculum. Every curriculum is jam-packed with other stuff that is important. And to say yes to something is to say no to something else. So we have to decide what goes. You know, do we lose music? Do we lose art? Or do we try and build it in, as I'm trying to do, so that it's not an addition, it is the curriculum. The curriculum per se, yes, there's more, again, governments could do, because even if you take a look at the British curriculum, it's very, very weak in terms of environmental systems, environmental management, systems thinking. It's quite strong on science and geography and math, but actually previous governments have removed the sustainability, the education for sustainability elements of it. So other governments, you know, if we didn't just look at British governments, I think at the moment, I think Wales is building more back in. I think Scotland have put in environment education for sustainability elements. So there are certain governments that are putting more of a focus on it than others. And then, you know, for some other governments, it's a bigger challenge. In the States, you have a section, you know, each state has its own set of learning curriculum. So teachers are desperate to get it in. They, you know, in general are fantastic at building in as many opportunities as they can, but it's actually what you can do in school is a fraction of what you can achieve at home. So what Catherine has said there about inculcating those activities and a mindset and values at home is actually probably much more impactful than what we can do at school. I don't want to use up all the time of your other candidates.
Great. No, you're absolutely right. Parents do play a pivotal role in the upbringing, but education and how you learn sort of also sets habits in children. And re-envisioning that educational curriculum to keep it up to date with the issues being faced today becomes very, very important. Um, so besides connecting with nature and explaining, you know, to kids in a very experiential way the issues faced today, what other things sets an ecological school apart?
We have a giant tortoise. No, I'm being facetious. I guess, as I say, for us, it is not a bolt-on, it is built in. So for me, understanding the systems and connecting the systems is really critically important. So as I said, we have a greenhouse, and in that greenhouse, we connect the idea of that is not just a place where we grow things, that is a place where we learn. And that system has to connect to our canteen. So we don't have a food provider, we have a chef. So the chef needs to work with the gardener and say, right, 6 months ahead, I need tomatoes. And then that goes into the food service so that then the children can connect where the food came from with the food they're eating. And then if we make excess fruit and vegetables, what do we do with it? Well, we sell it to the community, we bring community in, and we become sustainable as a community. So sustainability is not you cannot be that in isolation. I have to connect to Colette, who has to connect with Catherine, who has to connect with the consumers, who have to connect with Shift Eco. We have to think as a network, not isolated. We are not in competition, we are in collaboration. And this competitive view of the world, the anthropocentric, the human-centered view, is diametrically opposed to an ecological sense of point of view, which says that we are a part of this, not separate from it.
No, that's very, very correct. We are all in collaboration, and that's why we're all here together to discuss this important topic. Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, Brett. Thanks so much for your
Welcome.
input. Over to you, Colette. You've had a really interesting career. You went from working for a corporation and now you're writing books for children. What led to that change?
Before I begin, I'd just like to say that I think I missed a trick and I should have gone to the Arbor School when I was growing up, to be honest with you. I was like, that sounds amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went through a system of schooling which was very much in sync with you go to school, you work hard, you do well, you get good results, you go to university, you get a good job, it has to be like one with a bit of status, you just go on this corporate kind of ladder and you try to climb up it, and this is the way that you kind of get churned through life. And that's just a kind of a very typical example of what came out at the end of that, I think. And I didn't really think much about it. I just kind of did it, and I rebelled here and there, and I was a vegetarian from a young age, but still I went through that and without much questioning at all times, until kind of you have children or you start realizing that, oh, this isn't actually in sync with who I am, or what I want to represent to my children, and is this what I want for them? And also I just started to think, am I doing the best that I possibly can while I'm here? And I know about all these issues and problems. I can't continue my life in the way that I have been living it and pretend that it's all fine, because it's not. And so I need to do something about it myself. Right. So at that stage, I just decided that I was going to step back. I've been thinking about it for a while. It took me several years to kind of extract myself. Really that idea of doing something that's relevant for children here, because I realised that my example to my own kids, despite me being as much of an eco warrior as I can be and trying to, and my kids were brought up vegetarian. I'm vegan, but my kids are vegetarian in the beginning. Now they both eat meat. One of them's gone back to being vegan, but the teenager's not that interested. So it's difficult. You can give them as much as you possibly can, but they'll make up their own minds as well. And so it's just about trying to kind of bring as much positive influence to them as possible, and as much good examples to them as possible, and hope that some of it saturates and some of it goes in. So I think as well as that connection to nature, which is important. So I was out jogging with my illustrator partner before she became my partner, and we were talking about how we really wish we could do more. And that's when I decided, you know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to stand back and at least do something with a little bit of impact. So if it goes nowhere and nothing happens with it, at least I have tried. I've written some stories, been a bit creative, which is different for me, but also brought about important topics which are important to me in a fun, relevant way for kids that the kids can relate to. And also importantly in Arabic, so that it's relatable for people living here, for the locals, so that they also can have something that is relatable and that they can reference. And also the idea is about fun, making learning fun.
Right. No, I think that's really interesting, Colette. For our viewers who don't know about Save Our World, can you tell us a little bit more about Save Our World and a little bit more about the topics that are included in the books that you write?
Yeah, so Save Our World set it up about 3 years ago. It is a UAE company, and we've got a license for publishing, self-publishing our own books. We publish them in 100% recycled materials and vegetable inks. We use only UAE local suppliers, and the messages are all about recycling. So the first Eco Heroes book is about recycling, and it touches e-waste, plastic waste, but mostly e-waste, and different aspects of that. Second book is on food waste, so it's Fight for Food, and it approaches like agriculture from a cultural perspective here, and for the future of agriculture, food waste, and also the types of food that we eat. The third book is about plastic pollution, the Eco Heroes and the Plastic Planet, and that really focuses on not only plastic pollution, but also our oceans and the types of sharks, dolphins, marine life that we have here in the UAE. And also the fourth one, which has just come out, is the Eco Heroes Watch Water, and that's about water conservation, looking at our water footprint and sustainable fashion and animal agriculture all comes into it as well. And the idea is to make it all as fun and relevant as possible. So, and also the stories have kind of grown quite considerably since I started. In the beginning, never written a book. By the end of this fourth book, I feel as if I'm getting the message across quite well. And I've got one more book on clean energy, which will be coming out within the next 12 months.
Right. So through your books, are you trying to educate children about the UN Sustainable Development Goals? Do you think students are aware of the goals?
So I wanted to differentiate myself from any other children's author, because not coming from a writing background, I really needed to be different to be able to go out there and for people to want to buy my books. So the USP, I suppose, the unique selling point is that actually they do relate directly to the United Nations Development Goals. One of my roles in my previous job was to look at the United Nations Development Goals and also look at CSR and try and sort of pull some of what we were doing into that. So yes, the answer is yes, and also they address several points under the curriculums in several schools, so that Arabic, reading, literacy, sustainability, also things like moral education and social studies as well, about culture, diversity and inclusion, different races that we have here, and friendship, also pulling on Emirati culture. So I've got an Emirati lady who does all the translations for us, and a local company that does all the Arabic editing. So, it is important, it's very important. And the fact that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are addressed means then that people are sort of standing up a little bit and saying, well, actually, these are a bit different from other books.
Right, great. Thanks so much, Colette. I have a question for all three panelists. Do you think children broadly are aware of the UN Sustainable Development Goals?
So
you can go. Yeah.
I think it depends on the school, and it depends on the curriculum, and it really, really depends. And also I've seen schools where they have United Nations Sustainable Development Goals all over the walls, and they talk about them, but actually, you go into the canteen and it's full of plastic bottles, plastic cutlery, the staff rooms are full of plastic bottles, so it's this authentic learning and authentic example and credible examples that we need to actually set as well. So right. I think it's a mix. I don't know, maybe Brett's in a better position to talk about that.
I don't think they are from the UN's perspective. If I think about how children are less influenced, it's not usually these governing bodies, it's more popular people in the limelight. So since that's become more of a hot topic and more things as a consumer is available to us, I think they are starting to become more aware. But from those sustainability goals, I don't think they're very well connected to them as children.
Right. What do you think, Brett?
Yeah, concur, and again, I think it's a little bit patchy, I guess. So some schools, for sure, it sits right up there in terms of when you plan, you should be looking at different units and how does it fit in. Some plaster them all around and it's a little bit lip service, and I guess some are trying to do it in more meaningful ways. So again, for the youngest children, at my school at the moment is a newish school and a growing school, we're quite heavy in the primary school. So for the youngest children, they're a little bit esoteric, I think, a little bit complex. So you have to look at different ways to bring it to the children in a way that's fun or that they can understand. So there are actually some sort of simpler versions with the same outcomes, I guess, as the sustainability goals. For the older children, they're great context, fantastic context. And so I guess it's just thoughtful planning in terms of the choices of literature that you choose, or the project, or the context, or it might be Model United Nations, it might be extracurricular activities. There's 101 different ways to bring it into the curriculum. It's just a choice. And I think I said before, to say yes to something is to say no to something else. So if you really want to put that at the top of the agenda, you can find a way, but it's just going to be at the cost of something unless you're good enough to thread it through everything. And so I guess some schools, like it's not only the responsibility of schools to bring the goals to children, it's the responsibility of the community to bring these to children. So yeah, I'm waffling a little bit now. I guess it's yes, they're important. No, it's not consistent, and probably they're a little bit complex for younger children at the moment to really grasp it unless they see it in action.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. The UN Sustainable Development Goals can usually be more theoretical, and I think the practical element of it has to be brought forward. Do you think there are enough volunteering opportunities or activities that not just educators, but even parents do to make children familiar with the goals?
Well, I think Colette's making a good start by, putting it in the form of a story. That's great to connect with children. And I think it's really important for educators and parents community. It's not just about teaching them this. I think, as with all subjects, they all correlate. They need to know. I think we need to educate our children to be more analytical, critical thinkers, especially in a world where there's so much information out there. How do they make choices for themselves, and how do they make it that impacts the planet in a better way? So it's other skills as well that we can teach them, so as we make these responsible adults, they're able to make hopefully the correct decisions towards the planet as well.
Right. Anything else to add?
I think getting out into nature, reconnecting to nature is very, very important. We live in a city, you're busy, we're all, just look at the amount of time you spend outdoors every day and just think about how much you spent. As a child, the amount of time I spent outdoors was insane compared to the amount of time my children spend outside. We grew up outside, playing outside all the time. And that really, playing with snails, playing with stuff, and we got out there, we got messy, and we got involved with what was out there, and we were just kind of left out in the street, which was quite nice. But to reconnecting to nature, taking them to places, and showing them as well the damage of what our impact is having on animals and the planet. So for example, I'm on the board of ASRAC, which is an ocean conservation organisation here in the UAE, and we do beach cleanups, and we do lots of marine activities with schools and with corporates. So getting people involved in that as well, seeing children picking up trash on the beaches and seeing that they've saved a fish or saved a dolphin potentially is just really, really nice. But being able to show them the impact that what we do has on the environment as well. And I mean, I grew up on David Attenborough documentaries. I think these are still really, really important. And, I can't get my kids off Netflix, but if they started to watch something that was actually really important, it would really help. Even like one show, a week, or something that was really empowering and, relatable for them, or something that really grabs their attention. So I think this is important.
Colette, that's a business idea for you. We're going to soon see a Netflix show on your books. No.
Yeah. And Colette, that's a really good point. Like, one simple thing that I try to do with my daughter, and I bet we've all done it, is like, if you see a piece of litter, just pick it up, just, teach them it's okay. It doesn't matter who put it there, you're as a community clean up the environment as well. And I know about your beach walks, and they're amazing to do these beach cleanups and take the children along to them, get them involved. They're outside, they're having fun, they're with their parents. It's a great activity.
Right. So I think we've talked a lot about what parents can do, what educators can do, but how do you build that accountability to action? Because here we've talked a lot about awareness, right? But how do we build that accountability? And because that's the habit we need to build, what do you think will build that accountability in the future generation?
You asked a hard question. We've all gone quiet now. In schools, I guess one thing we're quite good at generally is establishing behavior norms. So, whatever behavior you want, you draw a line in the sand and say, this is what I expect that behavior to be. And then you put in carrots and sticks to try and encourage people to move towards that behavior until eventually you can pull away wipe out the line, and the new behavior is established where it is. So it's in terms of changing behaviors, is you have to put in the motivators and the consequences. So I guess the consequences don't even need to be immediate. It just has to be a continued refresher of, if we don't do that, this is what happens. Plastic rubbish, as we said, it's a really evident symptom of poor systems to manage that resource. So that's a really simple one. So if we can encourage them to do it, the negative is if we don't, we get this massive pile of garbage floating in the ocean. We have fish and things dying and being poisoned. And if we do, we feel better intrinsically, and we picked up this tangible pile of stuff and we've put it into the rubbish or to be recycled. So creating incentives for those sorts of things is great. Same with sustainable eating choices, or healthier, more sustainable eating choices. If we do this, there's a really positive outcome. If we don't do this, there's a more negative outcome. So most behavior changes need either a carrot or a stick. So I guess it's about just actually starting. No one said it was easy, just that it is necessary. So we have to start. And so it's a little bit of a chamber of echoes, because we've probably got parents and people in this group that are already committed to it. But it's about just saying, this is the one step I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it because it's good for the planet, it's good for me, it's good for the fish, whatever it's good for. And if we don't, here's the negative outcome. So the first thing is just take a step, be conscious, take a step, reward yourself intrinsically or extrinsically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the accountability piece is really, really hard, and I don't think it's necessarily up to us at grassroots level to put that accountability in place. It's very, very hard for us to do that. That needs to come from elsewhere. That needs to be kind of pushed from the top, to be honest, if we're looking at it in a systematic view. But I do think that we can sort of do a sort of reward scheme as well with our kids, and think about whatever happens with them. But also, I don't think we should shy away from talking to our children and showing them as well what the negative consequences are of human impact. We don't want to get them upset, but at the same point, we want them to see that, this isn't really a choice. We need to do this. And it's, the animals are dying, the polar bears are starving, the forests are on fire, it's continued. There's stuff out there that's really happening, flooding, there's people that are homeless, starving, it goes on and on. So whilst we don't want to overwhelm them with all of that, we can't completely protect them either, because some of these things are hard hitting, but will have an impact. And I think we need to sort of have that overall understanding that we are very privileged and very sheltered here in our lives in Dubai. And if our children or we were in a different environment, we wouldn't really be having these discussions. It's much more socially hard hitting. We see it in front of us that human impact and climate change has an impact on people's lives and animals' lives. So we don't want to make climate-related depression something that we want our children to have, but it apparently is something that is in the UK. And so I think the important thing is that we give people hope, and we give our children hope, because people say to me all the time, what difference does it make? What difference does one person make? And it's just constantly trying to reiterate that everyone has to have the attitude that, well, every single little thing matters. Because where would we be if everybody had that attitude? We really have to just as a collective say, right, we're doing one good positive thing and keep that cycle going and going and going no matter what. And it will have that chain reaction. So hopefully.
Yeah. Anything you want to add, Catherine?
Just to echo what Brett and Colette said, that there is hope. These problems are solvable, the humans can solve them. And yeah, just don't underestimate, just doing one small change. It doesn't need to be you don't need to be an eco warrior, but just changing small habits have a big difference. My nan used to have this saying that if you look after the pennies, the pounds look after themselves. And it's all that kind of sort of thing. You know, if you just look after the little bits, the savings are great. And the same with this sort of environment. If we just all took a little step, like the impact could be great.
Great. Thanks so much. We're almost out of time. Any last short comments from the panelists? You're on mute, Brett.
The famous quote of 2020.
Yeah.
Colette said, we've got to give them hope. And I think I said at the start, these are human created challenges that are human solvable. So it just takes, we have to collectively get together to shift the norm. And if we can just shift the norm, this is entirely doable, but we've got to get moving, because it's this climate change is not put the brakes on. We need to slow down. This is 2 wheels already off the cliff. We actually need to reverse the system. So there's hope, but we're going to have to get moving.
Fair. Anyone else that wants to add? Last thoughts? Catherine, Colette?
Thank you very much for having us and putting this session on. It's been great. So thank you. And I think that's a pretty good start for Shift Eco, to be honest.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all the attendees who attended this month's webinar. We at Shift Eco do webinars every month. So please stay tuned on our Instagram pages, on our website. We want to keep the conversation going. We want to get stakeholders together to discuss these topics, to come up with solutions, to build more awareness. So please make sure you're following us and keeping up to date with our webinars. That's it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the panelists. It was lovely to host you guys today. And we look forward to having you with us sometime in the future. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.